Hello, you multi-moronic McDonald's masticators. And thank you to Alec Wilson for providing the malt mention to this bothy review. In the bothy, somewhere in the Irish Sea. I'm Ralphie and welcome to Ralphie Review 951. And I suspect that Alec is not a huge fan of industrial entertainment foods. Which is fine, because Alex should be totally at home with this review, which is for a product which is not, it's really the very opposite, the antithesis, that's a big word that, the antithesis of mass-produced consumer food. This is very much a beverage, a spirit, a Scotch whisky, for the discerning and those who are looking for the relatively exotic and soon to be unobtainable. It's 18-year-old Capardonnach, or Capardonnach, sorry, better get this right. Capardonnach is a Speyside distillery which is now closed. It has, I'll just give you a brief history of it as a way of introduction, actually, just to kind of set the picture here, and before I actually tell you why I'm reviewing this specific single malt. Capardonnach was originally built in 1898 across the road from Glengrant Distillery. Glengrant is one of Scotland's biggest single malt distilleries, with a very popular and recognisable super malty characteristic, and particularly in the hands of independent bottlers you can get some fabulous versions. And it's not that long ago, malt mates, that you could actually buy some seriously old Glengrants from the likes of Gordon and MacPhail, Cadenheads and other significant independent bottlers for reasonable money. But sadly, those days have gone. In fact, some of the most outstanding whiskies that I've tasted historically now have been well aged, so over 20 years old Glengrants. And because of the scale of production there and the volume that is produced, rather like Macallan in many ways, there's plenty of Glengrant around. So if you're looking for it, I do recommend independent bottlers, where you will routinely find better quality. There are official bottlings, and that's fine if you want an introduction at a reasonable price to Glengrant. But let's focus on its next door neighbour, Capardonnach, which was originally intended as Glengrant number 2, but as this happens with Scotch whisky distilleries, the signature was very different, remarkably different. And what you find with Capardonnach is it's more light, floral, complex, fruity, apple, mint, pear notes as well. But a delightful whisky. When you see it at auction, by the way, particularly at auction, take it seriously, give it a second look and do your research, because Capardonnach is not one of these distilleries that is obviously collectible, even though the distillery is shut. Now what's happening now is that the owners of the distillery have some leftover stock, because the distillery is demolished now. It's now been removed to make way for an extension of Forsyth's copper pot still producers, the biggest copper pot still providers in Scotland, in fact in the UK. So not long after, let's pour some, I might as well. Since I've started, since I've got a very good reason to do so. It didn't last long after it opened when they identified that the signature was different, or for whatever reason they kind of closed it down in 1902, and it remained mothballed for over 60 years before they reawakened the distillery again to restart production. And it operated from 1967 up into 2002, when it came under the ownership of Pernod Ricard, who are noted for increasing the size of existing established distilleries and either mothballing, selling or demolishing, or selling off or demolishing smaller distilleries which they feel doesn't fit within their portfolio. So fair play, you know, when you're running a business, you have to make business decisions, and it's not based in sentiment. But we're now at the stage where the only Caperdonics available are older ones, so the prices are really starting to increase if you want to get a taste of it. The 18-year-old is the youngest official bottling at the moment, and it's in the UK it's £120. So it's kind of a pricey whiskey, but if you're looking for a gift for someone who's a whiskey collector, a whiskey drinker, and they want a blast from the past that's no longer available, that's no longer around, and that any subsequent bottlings, being older, are going to be that much more expensive, then this is certainly one to consider. What I'm really enjoying about this is that it is not characteristic of Caperdonic. This is actually quite smoky, and that to me makes it all the more interesting. It's bottled at 48%, and it's unchill filtered, and it says on the label this is peated, so it's officially a peated version of Caperdonic. But what you notice immediately is it's more smoke in the nose than peatiness. There's certainly some peatiness in the flavour, but it's the smokiness that dominates. On the nose, quite rich, quite syrupy, kind of light, so there's a lot of kind of complexity coming through at an early stage on the nose, and it's certainly that delivery is helped by the higher bottling strength of 48%. And I do believe, it's purely my opinion, that at 48% is the strength that delivers what's there. Any lower strength and it would start to become, to be honest, a bit anemic. So a wise decision that. I also noticed that although they're saying that it's unchill filtered, don't for 1 minute believe that there's not been a lot of filtering going on. It's been heavily filtered, except that they didn't chill the whiskey before they did the filtering. So it's something for a future extras in which I give you the degrees of filtering that happen in whiskey. Taste. Sharp. Slightly aggressive actually. Fresh fruit, apple, slight peach note, pears, ripe pears, and some really tangy peatiness, which quickly transcends or morphs from overt recognisable peatiness to smokiness as you go through the development into the finish. The whole thing is rather compressed because of the strength, so I'm now going to add a drop of water. At this point, I'm a whole teaspoon, so the full 5 millilitres. And while it's opening up, I'm going to tell you just a little bit more about the distillery. It was dismantled in 2010, so having been mothballed for over 60 years, it was really put beyond use in 2010 and basically converted for another purpose, making way for the expansion of the copper pot still manufacturers next door. So we're never going to see it start producing again. And in fact, in my extras, in Ralphie Review 951 extras, I'm going to be telling you the difference between mothballed and beyond use, and tell you the different stages of whisky activity to help get a bigger kind of overview of where a distillery is at, because what's happened in the past is certainly going to happen in the future. So it's good to have that secondary knowledge about the situation with distilleries. Now, as regards the collectability of Caperdonnoch, because it's a closed distillery, it's not that great because very few people recognise it, and the real collectors, the real whisky investors, are sticking to the obvious suspects, including Macallan, Ardbeg and Bowmore, which tend to kind of dominate. But for the true whisky aficionado who's looking to have something in their stash from the past that you're never going to see again, you're never going to see this particular signature, then Caperdonnoch is the one. So as a one-off gift whisky for the end of the year, now's probably the time, because any future bottlings are going to be that much more expensive, and you'll see that when you look at the other bottlings which are available at the moment, which are the 21 and the 25-year-old, where you see quite a jump in the price. Now, I've added some water, just give it a little slow swirly, no shakies, back to the nose. It starts off quite Speyside, which is where Caperdonnoch distillery was situated. But then you get that minty note, quite a complex minty, some green notes. In fact, there's something slightly Irish, pure pot still about it. And on the flavour, tiny taste. Lovely malty, semi-sweet arrival, quite rich and viscous, toffeed, vanilla, raisiny, definitely raisiny, quite good raisins too. Some spiciness and gingeriness in the background, green ginger, pickled ginger, and then the kind of floral notes, honeysuckle, absolutely, quite complex mint presence. So you're looking at a range of mints: apple mint, peppermint, spearmint. There's a touch of spearmint about this, and the mintiness is really being amplified by the presence of the peatiness in this whisky, which has weathered the 18 years really quite successfully, and develops, by the way, the longer you leave this whisky in the glass, you're going to get much more out of it. In fact, when you first open the bottle, you start off disappointed. It's that kind of whisky. You need to give it time, which is why you would buy it for someone who already knows their whisky. Or if you already know your whisky and you want to buy yourself something which is exotic and you're not going to find it in the future, this is a very good sound consideration. Back to the palate again. Opening up really well, improving all the time, and over the next half an hour this whisky will continue to improve. And when you're halfway through tasting it, you'll start to get confused because it's so Islay in character, incredibly Islay. To me, it tastes more like an old Bruichladdich, a peated Bruichladdich. It's what I would expect a Port Charlotte to taste like at 25 years old, if that gives you some point of reference. But there you have it. This is an unusual. It's an official bottling. I believe there's caramel added. I really do. But that's purely my personal opinion. But not a lot of caramel. But I think there is caramel added to it. Fortunately, when you're literally adding less caramel, you get less damage. It's the way it works. So what am I going to give this for a malt mark? This is being reviewed at this moment in time because it's the time, and we're coming to the end of the year, when people would consider, a more of an unusual, that's a good word, an unusual whisky that isn't generally available and is only really of interest to those who really know whisky, which is why I'm recommending it to the experienced connoisseur. 88 out of 100. It's a malt mark for Capardonnach. 18-year-old, bottled at 48% and unchill filtered, and it's a peated version, and I think actually that's what really makes it. It's the peat that makes it, the integrity and the fullness of the peat, because the casks over these 18 years, they've been under maturing, right? And when you've got less maturing, restrained maturation, you get more of the original signature, you get more of the freshness of the peaty component, and I think that's what makes this genuinely interesting. And although in the UK it's £120 a bottle, and if you can find it anywhere else in the world, it's probably going to be more, because that's the way things are going at the moment. It depends on your budget. It really depends what you want to pay out for something which is has a true authentic history. It's a genuine part of Scotch whisky history, and we're never going to see it again. But there you go, now you know. Now, I want to conclude by saying that in my last review, 950, I was talking about Tam Dhu, and I said that it was Little Black Hill. Tam Dhu means Little Black Hill, and Dhu means hill. I was wrong. Thank you to all you malt mates who messaged me to point that out. Dhu does not mean hill. Dhu means black. So Tam Dhu is black. It's little black. Right. Dhu. Little hill is black. That's the Tam part of it. Hill in Gaelic is Ard. Ard. Ardbeg, Ardmore. So I just want to clarify that, because when there's any bloopers in this channel and you point them out to me, I like to kind of come back and just give you the update, so that hey, that's what happens. Thank goodness I'm not an expert. I'm just an amateur commentator, right? So I can get away with these little bloopers now and again. And finally, just to remind you that on Saturday, the Saturday after this video becomes public, is going to be the online Scotch Whisky Awards 2022. You'll find a link below to the Aquavit channel, where the live awards ceremony will be taking place on Saturday, 5th of November at 6 p.m, commencing 6 p.m. If you are interested at all in whisky and what's the best whiskies to buy, that's the channel, that's the awards ceremony, to find out what is the democratic choice. What are the best whiskies? What are the best distilleries? What are the best independent bottlers? If you're looking to get the knowledge to inform your purchasing, the Oswis are the place to discover what you need to know. I'm Ralphie. Thank you for watching. Pop back again for my extras, in which I will talk about active distilleries, mothballed distilleries, dead distilleries, and what that's really all about. Bye.